Just so folks know, welcome to the October 2021 meeting of the East Liberty Park Community Organization, otherwise known as ELPCO. It's the community council with the funnest name to say, at least we like to think so. We represent the area between Liberty Park and 1300 East, basically near East High School, 9th and 9th area. And our northern boundary is 8th South, 800 South, and goes down to 17th South. We're a nice little rectangle over on the east side of Salt Lake City. This community council has been around for almost 40 years. And one thing we do is we run the 9th and 9th Street Festival pretty much every September, except we missed 2020. We were glad to be back this year, and we hope that you were able to attend. All right, I'm just going to check a couple quick things here. There we go. And sure the chat works. Looks like it does. If you guys saw my chats there in the hosts and panelists and with the attendees, it's a good way for us to share information, especially if you're presenting and you have some information that you want to share with folks. I've also got a bunch of links that I'll be putting in there as we go through. Let me actually start that off right now. Okay. And I think we can go ahead and get started. Is anybody here from the Salt Lake City Fire Department? Can you put something in the chat if you're here from Salt Lake City Fire? You know, sometimes they're not able to attend all the time, but I just wanted to see if anyone's there. Nothing yet. We'll give it a minute or two. Just wanted to welcome everyone again to the East Liberty Park Community Organization's October meeting. This will likely be our final meeting of the year. We generally don't meet in November or December because the fourth Thursday usually falls right around some holidays. We have held meetings in the past if something comes up, so we'll just see what happens. Joined in this webinar by ELPCO board members. I just wanted to give a shout out to Andrew Stone, Ann Weaver, Bradley Shoup, Rebecca Huber, Michael Alosi. A couple more board members I think we'll turn on a little bit. ELPCO's board is all volunteer, and they're the ones who kind of run a lot of things within this community. And we'll have an announcement from Ann a little bit later about a special project we're actually launching this winter for the ELPCO community, which is going to be pretty exciting. We're also going to be joined by some special guests for tonight's meeting, including Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall, who's actually coming from the Fair Park Community Council meeting right now. So she'll be a little bit later. We swapped the schedule a bit. And so we'll also first hear from Nancy Bulmer from the Salt Lake City Airport. She's got a great presentation about what's going on over on the west side of the city, which is so convenient and so close. If any of you have ever lived in the Denver area, you know that you practically drive to Kansas to get to the airport. So it's nice to have one that's actually in our own state. So we'll be really looking forward to that presentation. Coming along pretty good. All right. Let's go ahead and get started then. If there's no one here from Salt Lake City Fire, we'll go ahead with Detective Nathan Meinzer from Salt Lake City Police Department. And Nathan, I presume you would want me to share the presentation. Is that right? Should I get that up?
Yes, please, if you could. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Can you see that? Is that visible? Should I go to, let me go to that view right there. Is that a little better?
Yep, that works great. Thank you. So every month I get together with Jason and we put together the calls for service that we get. And I pass along all the reports that officers take and we get the numbers together and we target specifically just the area that's ELPCO itself. So we can always go into District 5 as a whole, but I think it's more important to know how your community is affected. That way you kind of know what your neighbors are dealing with, what you're dealing with, instead of all the way on the west side by the freeway. So these numbers here are our top 15 offenses throughout the year, so the totals. So the number one offense I wanted to talk about is that car prowl that you see at the top. So what could help us out in deterring these or reducing these numbers is if you see suspicious behavior, people looking into car windows, trying car door handles, please do call non-emergency and report that. We're looking for behavior. So someone just walking through the neighborhood, you got to see if there's any behavior that they're exhibiting to report. For instance, like I mentioned, looking into windows and things like that. So these numbers are awesome to look at, kind of helps us know what we're dealing with. And the next two ones are traffic accidents. We have a lot of traffic accidents in the area. 7th East is one of our big bloodlines, as officers call them, because it's a lot of through traffic. If you could switch to the next page, please. So this is the representation of the increases from the beginning portion of the year to the later portion of the year, where we have increased in the number of incidents. So when we compare the beginning part of the year for those traffic accidents that are reportable compared to the end of the year, as you see, we're 9 more than we were compared to the beginning of the year. So these are all things that we want to pay attention to and say, okay, well, while these are rising, what can we do to try and reduce these issues? When it comes to traffic accidents, things like that, that's where I try and focus on, okay, where is the biggest location that we have accidents? And is that maybe something that we can forward on to our motor crew to try and do some deterrence by doing some speed enforcement or things like that? So the missing person thing, that's kind of hard because we can't really deter that very much. Police assistance, once again, that's something that just kind of comes up. So I did want to mention, though, the family offenses, domestic violence. That's something that we'll talk about in a few slides after this, but please check on neighbors, make sure everyone's okay, and understand we're all really stressed out. If you could go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is our top 10 decreases from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So if you noticed earlier on our first slide, our number 1 was car prowl. If we compare that beginning part of the year to now, as you see, we're significantly lower than we were before. So this has been something that I kind of attribute a lot to citizens calling in and helping us with the information, as well as trying to use some overtime shifts to deter some of it. With staffing numbers, it's been more difficult, but luckily we've been having some success. So those of you that have been calling in car prowls, thank you so much for helping us out. It really does mean a lot. And then you're welcome to go through that list if you'd like to see it. And go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So this one is talking about traffic accidents. So this is reportable traffic accidents. What that means is whether someone was either injured or there was more than $1,500 worth of damage, then it is what's considered a reportable traffic accident. And as you can see, we're steadily going up throughout the year. So in previous years past, we do notice that traffic accidents, by the time that the new year rolls around, people are kind of more accustomed to driving in snow and inclement weather and things like that. And then when we go down into the summer times, we all kind of are nice sunshine and, there's not a whole lot of rain or anything like that. So we kind of get used to that type of driving. And then as soon as we start getting rainstorms, snowstorms, traffic accidents start to go up. So you'll see as soon as we start getting some heavy snows, there will be a significant increase in traffic accidents. So please, anytime that there's a storm, just take a little bit longer to get to work. Be safe, give more room in between your vehicle and the vehicle in front of you. So just something to think about. And go to the next slide for me. So I believe this is the last slide. So this is something that I mentioned a little bit before. So this is referring to our domestic violence non-criminal. So what this means is neighbors or even partners in a relationship have called police to ask for some help because there's arguments going on. So when we go out to calls like this, domestic violence is classified as partners in a relationship that have either lived together or have a long-term relationship or have children together, things like that. And when it comes to the state law, our hands are kind of tied. We have certain protocols that we have to follow. And so part of that is documenting any domestic violence situation. So these, though, are ones that did not get physical. So officers typically in this situation would go out and we would identify, were there any crimes that were committed? And if not, we try and create a safety plan. We do what we can to de-escalate that argument and ask if we can have the parties separate for the night, anything that we can do to try and help mitigate any further issues. So the important thing right now is pandemic, everyone going back to work. There's a lot of stress, like a lot, and everyone across the nation is feeling it. There's been a rise nationwide when it comes to domestic violence. So if you don't want to call police, that's okay, because there's hotlines out there. There's other resources out there. If you need help, there's people for you. And I always advocate, check on your neighbors, family members, and just try and always remember that we're in this together and we're all really stressed out. So please keep an eye on your friends and family and even neighbors. So our website has all of our stats. It's public data. You can pull very in-depth information. I will put my information in the chat as well as a link to those stats. If anyone ever wants to go more in depth than that, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to discuss any issues or concerns you have. And then if you have questions, type them in the chat and I'll reply in the chat to those questions. I don't want to take up more time. So thank you for having me, and I'll put that info in the chat.
Thank you, Detective Meinzer, and thank you again for pulling those stats every month for ELPCO. This is not District 5 data. This is actually for the boundaries within ELPCO, which gives us a real micro analysis of what's going on. And you can see that what we experience in ELPCO is different from other communities and neighborhoods in District 5 experience. So thanks for doing that analysis, and especially getting really into the weeds on some of that. I put a link to the PDF of that short little slide deck in the chat. So if you wanted to download that and look at it more closely, it's available for you. Are there any questions for Detective Meinzer about what he said or about some of the other issues that have come up from our board members or from folks who are watching and attending? Usually you stick around, Detective Meinzer, in case something else comes up. So appreciate you doing that. All right. I next want to go to Ann Weaver. It's actually a new addition to the agenda, a very quick update. As I mentioned, that ELPCO's got kind of a new interesting project we're launching. So Ann, could you tell us a little about it and give folks a preview so they can start thinking about it?
I just wanted everyone to know that ELPCO is putting together a new grant. It's going to be called the ELPCO Neighborhood Boost Grant. And it is, we're looking to fund some small projects in the ELPCO boundary areas. So either from residents or businesses that have ideas of how to help the ELPCO neighborhood. We'll have an application put together by early next year that they can submit for those ideas. Ideas would be like landscaping, common spaces, community get-togethers. We will have some funds available to help with those. We're leaving it open because we're looking for the community also to give us ideas to of what needs to be done. And once again, in early next year, we should have an application and see it on the Facebook page, see it in Jason's emails that get sent out of how to apply for this grant. And we're super excited to see what community members want and how we can help out the community in that way.
Great, thanks, Ann. Thanks for leading this. Ann is the treasurer at ELPCO, which means she gets all of our gold bars and doubloons. She keeps them in a giant treasure chest. It's really exciting. No, just kidding. But it is a new project, and we're kind of patterning it off of the CIP grants that the city puts out, the capital improvement project. Ours are going to be a lot smaller. Isn't it like a max of about $2,500, Ann? Is that right?
That is correct. That's what
Okay.
we're looking at.
So something that you can impact your neighborhood with, but need a little bit of extra seed money or funding or hiring someone to help that out. That's what these grants are for. Watch for more information about that. I also want to thank Michael Alosi, our at-large board member, for working on this project quite a bit as well. He comes from some experience in Denver, community councils there where they've done some similar things. And so we're glad to borrow his expertise. Great. All right. Well, watch for that coming up in the winter and the application starting again in January. Let's go next to Nancy Vollmer from the Salt Lake City Airport. Nancy, you've got a presentation for us about the new SLC, which I think a lot of ELPCO residents have probably been through or maybe are about to, thinking ahead to the holiday travel season coming up. So we're looking forward to learning more about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Just give me a second and I'll share my screen here. There we go. Can you see that all right? Okay, perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I always love talking to groups about the new SLC. And now that we've been open for a little over a year, I thought it'd be a good time to come and provide an update. And so just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've been with the airport about 6 years now, and I do the communications and marketing work. So I think the best job at the airport because I get to promote what's happening out there. So I'd like to just start with a quick look back. And this past year, believe it or not, the airport celebrated its 100-year anniversary. And so on December 21st, unfortunately, it couldn't be a huge celebration, but we did have a small celebration at the airport in the new greeting room. And as part of that celebration, we released a history book about the airport. It's titled From an Airmail Outpost to an International Hub. And it's on the website if anyone's interested. Has some wonderful details about how the airport started as a airmail hub and grew into an international airport. We also produced a documentary, which is about 50 minutes long. It also is on our website, and it has some really fascinating footage of the airport from back in the day. So some of you may know that the airport was first built in the 1960s. And so there's some really fun footage from that. So just wanted to give a little plug to the history, since that's going to be winding down in a few months here. So in general, as far as an airport update, before I go into the construction, I wanted to mention that the airport actually is a department of the city. I don't think a lot of people realize that. Of course, we're also a hub for Delta Airlines, and we just received new rankings on the airport. We're the 21st busiest airport in North America and the 70th busiest airport in the world. And we are the recipient of many national awards. A couple that just came in the last few months is the airport was ranked the 8th best airport in the country by Condé Nast Traveler's Reader's Choice Awards. So that came from readers of their publication. We also were 5th in the latest J.D. Power North America Airport Satisfaction Study in the large hub airport category. So a lot of people have been taking notice of the new airport, and we did just open the first phase, and we're building the second phase. Just a quick update on how passenger traffic is doing. Actually, travel is really doing well at the airport. We are rebounding from the pandemic, and there's days when we are close to or exceed some of the numbers that we were seeing in 2019. So when I put down here the busiest days, these are the number of passengers that come through the front door in one day. So this does not account for any of the connecting passengers. And we had a very busy fall break. And I think it's just indicative of the fact that people are really feeling more comfortable getting out and traveling because of vaccinations, and also because they're feeling a little bit stir crazy and they need to get out. We have been so fortunate, I think, in Salt Lake City in Utah, because we have the great outdoors at our back door. And so we had a lot of people who were traveling to Utah through the airport to go to the national parks, and then also to go to the ski resorts. And we're also expecting to see a really busy ski season, because we've had some early snowfall that gets out in the national news, and then people start booking. But we actually were able, because of the pandemic, to move up the construction on phase 2. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Excuse me. But we have been Delta's best performing hub. And we actually have some new service that we recently announced that's coming to Salt Lake City. And that is Eurowings is going to be providing nonstop service to Frankfurt. So we are very excited about that. So with a larger airport, I think you can expect to see more flights to more destinations. We're just steps away from accessing the world. And I think that as international travel slowly rebounds, we'll start to see flights return. For example, Aeromexico has returned. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had the first nonstop flight to Canada. And we're looking forward to Delta bringing back Paris in the spring. And who doesn't like Paris in the springtime? So a little bit more about the goals that we had for the new airport. As I mentioned, the airport was initially built, at least Terminal 1, in 1960. And the facilities had been added on through the years, but they really were old. They did not meet seismic standards. They were not actually the right size for the new aircraft that the airlines were flying. And there was a lot of congestion. It wasn't just curbside. You saw it in the gatehold areas, in the restaurants, in the restrooms. So when it came time to look at whether we should retrofit or rebuild, it really made sense to rebuild. And also because our community is growing. And so we needed to build a facility that could accommodate growth. I don't think a lot of people realize that the former airport was built for 10 million people. And we were seeing about 26 million people per year pre-pandemic. And this new airport, when it is completed, is built for 34 million passengers. And one thing that I really wanted to stress here is that we are building this airport in phases. And so the first phase opened on September 15th. That included a new parking garage. It included a brand new terminal with a central screening area and the west end of Concourse A. Then 6 weeks later, at the end of October, we opened up a tunnel, which is a temporary tunnel, to access Concourse B on the west. And so the past year has really, it's been a learning year for us. And on everything from, once passengers started interacting with the airport, we learned what signage we still needed. Because of the pandemic, our restaurants and our shops weren't able to open on day one. So we've gradually been building those out. And I hope that a lot of you have had an opportunity to travel through the airport, but if you haven't, I just wanted to show a few images because I think the one comment I hear the most about the airport is that it's beautiful. And don't hear that about many airports, but we really took a conscious effort to incorporate the beauty of Utah and represent it in the airport. So some of the art installations that you're seeing here are the Canyon by Gordon Huether, and that will continue in phase 3 when we open up Concourse B. And we will also have a really great art installation in the central tunnel when that opens up. This is part of phase 2. The Falls is a beautiful dichroic glass art installation that drops from the ceiling to the floor and the escalators when you enter. And then you're also seeing what we call plates and benches for passengers to sit on. And then the Delta Sky Club as well, which is actually one of the largest sky clubs in Delta's network currently. Now, there is one that's going to be opening up, excuse me, back in New York. So that will I guess, trump us when that opens up. But we did open up some wonderful new restaurants and shops and really took a conscientious look at providing, a good combination of local and regional brands. So you're going to see some of the brands you saw before, such as Marketplace, but you're also seeing some new local brands like Gourmandise, Granados, Hip and Humble, King's English, some of those brands. And the one thing that we're really proud of is that all of the concessions have street pricing. So whatever you pay downtown is the same price you'll pay at the airport. So there isn't a markup there. And we actually are now on the street with a request for proposal for phase 2. We're going to be adding in Concourse A East 19 new retail and restaurants. So there's more to come. I also wanted to mention sustainability at the airport, because that was also something that we really focused on when we were building the airport. And when we celebrated our 1-year anniversary, we announced that we had achieved LEED Gold certification. And so this is a photo of the award along with the mayor and our executive director, a representative from the architectural firm HOK, and also someone from the Green Building Council who came out for this award. We have more water efficient plumbing fixtures in our restrooms. We have diverted 95% of the construction waste from the landfill and use that. Our airlines have converted to electric ground support equipment. So those tugs that you see moving bags around. And that has reduced 8,000 metric tons of greenhouse gases annually. We also, of course, have added more electric vehicle charging stations for both passengers and for our employees. Just think about it too. When you're out at the airport, we have a lot more natural light. So we can actually save on the electric bill, because that more windows just means that it's more environmentally friendly, but it also provides some really nice welcome views for our passengers. So they can look out to the east and see the Wasatch Mountains, or look to the west and see the Ochres. And I wanted to show this slide because this actually was taken a few months ago, but there's been more built up, but it shows the demolition of the previous airport. In February of 2020, just as the project was in the final stretch, of course, we had the pandemic that hit. So we took the opportunity to, with the downturn to look at how we could advance phase 2 more quickly. We had fewer passengers, so we didn't need as many gates. And so we had initially planned to keep some of the concourses open from the former airport, and we had built a bridge to the new terminal, but we realized we didn't need those gates anymore. And so we accelerated phase 2. And what you're seeing here is looking to the south. There's a terminal in the plaza. This is what's going to be the permanent central tunnel. And then what you're seeing over to the upper part of the screen is where we've built out, and we're continuing to build out, Concourse A to the east. And we actually have made some huge progress on that, but it's moving this project ahead will end up cutting off a couple of years on the construction time, and then also will save us probably about up to $300 million. So definitely worth it. And it was amazing to me to see the demolition of this facility, because it's right outside our office windows. But just a quick note on the cost of building this new airport. The total cost is about $4.5 billion. And there's no local taxpayer dollars that are going to pay for the airport. We pay for the facility through users' fees, whether it's through the fees that you pay when you purchase a ticket, when you rent a car. We had a lot of savings when we started this project. In fact, when I started at the airport, we were the only large hub airport in the country with no debt. So we had cash on hand to start with. And also we have, well, we do have debt now. We have gone out to the bond market. So we do have that source of funding as well as some federal funding. But the demolition for the old airport took 8 months. And so that happened very quickly. And the majority of the material that was brought down has been salvaged or reused. So for example, the concrete that was from the parking garage is actually a base layer in the airfield paving project. So as I mentioned, Concourse A to the east is taking shape. What you're seeing here is a ceremony we held a couple of weeks ago. It's called a topping out. It's when one of the final steel beams is placed on top of the facility. You're also seeing, excuse me, one of the first beams that was initially placed just in the concourse. And you can see some of the aerials showing the concourse and how far along it has come. It's to the point now where a lot of it's becoming enclosed, which is nice for the workers for the winter season. And then on the other side of the screen, you're seeing some pictures of the tunnel. Again, a much larger tunnel, and it is being built. Well, first of all, let me say with Concourse A to the east, that's adding an additional 22 gates for Delta. And as I mentioned before, we'll have 19 new shops and restaurants. But the central tunnel is being built larger because the tunnel that we currently have was actually built in 2004. And it was built, you know, and sealed up kind of like an Egyptian tomb. And so that's something that is a smaller tunnel. This one is larger and can accommodate a train when we eventually build a Concourse C. In the meantime, what we're looking at is incorporating people movers when the tunnel first opens. But just to give you an idea of the size of this, the central tunnel excavation is 20 feet deep, so it's pretty massive. Okay, one thing I wanted to address is we've been getting some feedback from passengers about the distance of the new airport. And I wanted to explain that a little bit. Here you're seeing the layout of the airport. And it's a linear configuration, versus the pier configuration that we had before. So when you think about that pier configuration, you had the ability of only one aircraft to move in and out of that pier at one time. Now this configuration is more efficient because, as you can see, you can have two aircraft moving in and out at one time. So it's more efficient because planes don't have to wait to get to their gate. So it saves the airlines fuel. And also, we have larger aircraft that we're using today. And so this configuration can accommodate the larger aircraft. Just to give you an idea, when you see those 4 regional jets, those are the size of aircraft that were being flown early on. You may remember flying out of Concourse C, and it was more for those regional jets. And so the former airport was really built for that size of plane. Well, now we're seeing more of the 737s or the A321s, 787s and A350s. So the gates need to be further apart for those larger aircraft. And just to give you a sense of what's to come, as far as what's currently open, what you see in yellow are the current gates. The gates that will be opening in spring of 2023 as part of phase 2 are in that orange rust color. And then the remainder of those gates on Concourse A East will open in the fall of 2024. And then we also will be opening up the central tunnel in about October of 2024. So that will be the completion of phase 2. And then we'll start on phase 3, which are additional gates in Concourse B East. So we will be adding additional gates, and we will also, we have the capability, I should say, of adding an additional 16 gates beyond that. So that would be a phase 4, but that's something that hasn't been signed off on yet. So it's something that we're looking at. It's the ability to grow as the community grows. So that's just a brief overview. I hope I didn't take too much time of where we were at and where we're going. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or respond to anything in the chat as well. Oh, can I just mention one other thing too? We do have a wonderful airport app. So if you are interested in downloading that, I encourage you to do that before you fly, because it has some really great information and some good navigational information for those who haven't flown out of the airport quite yet.
Thank you, Nancy. That was very thorough investigation of what's been going on with the airport. I love that 360-degree view of the construction and what's going on. I presume that was a drone or a helicopter pilot that got kind of dizzy. But we did have a question from Judy Short, who's our land use advisor. She wanted to know, when will people movers part of the tunnel be finished? So will people movers be a part of the new central tunnel? Will there be any changes to the way the tunnels are done based on some of the feedback on the long walks to Concourse B?
Yeah, so that's because of the feedback that we've been getting. We are looking at people movers. We're just looking at various models that can be used in the tunnel. People do ask about having the train, but it doesn't really make sense to put a train in because the distance is really not far enough. But we do have the ability to add a train eventually when we have a Concourse C, which is way down the road. So we are looking at that. And I would encourage anyone to provide feedback to us. We do have an airport info address that people can email to us, and we address every single one of those emails that come in. both good and bad.
Can you see the questions in the chat, Nancy? There's one more.
Okay. Oh,
From
right.
Rebecca
Oh, I'm
Hoover.
so glad that someone asked that. So, yeah, we just opened up tracks. We did the official dedication on Monday. So it is so convenient now to get to the airport on public transportation. Basically, the tracks experience is similar to what it was before with the old airport. The station is right at the terminal. So you get off of the train, you walk to the terminal, you go up a level, go through security, or you go up a couple of levels and check your bags. So I don't know what the ridership numbers are yet, but I really do expect to see those numbers increase. That's I can't imagine. Well, I guess because of the pandemic, some people weren't using public transportation by now. I think people are more comfortable doing so. And with tracks open, I think we'll see those numbers increase.
Is the
Great.
parking lot construction almost done for the short-term parking, like the multi-day thing?
Yeah, the parking is completed.
Oh, it is?
So it is. So that's done. We have the parking garage actually has twice as many parking spaces, but the surface parking for short-term parking is complete. And people, I tell you, they were using it. We were really full up with our economy parking. We are going to start looking at some options for parking. Right now, not a lot of people are aware that you have the ability to reserve parking on our website, whether it's on the parking garage or if it's in the surface parking lot. And we're going to start looking at some other options too to help encourage people, or I guess to make their parking experience a little bit more convenient.
I like the piano.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's
Touch.
we're getting some really good feedback on that.
Other questions for Nancy via the chat or from our board? I had a quick one. When the airport is totally built out, all the terminals and concourses are finished, how big will it be? I mean, are we approaching Detroit, Minneapolis, Houston? Like, where are we going to rank when this is all done in terms of the complete build out?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I mentioned, we are going to have about the capacity to serve 34 million passengers each year. And we're considered a large hub airport. And so that's something that will stay in that category. But I think as this community continues to grow, that and I get asked that a lot. People will say, what are we like? I kind of feel like we're similar to like a Detroit airport, and the configuration is very similar to that. But I really think that this community is a hot economy, and we're continuing to see people grow here. So I think that our numbers will continue to go up, and that we'll probably, at some point, look at building that phase 4 and those additional 16 gates if the trend continues.
Just a follow-up question from George Chapman. The tracks that just was completed, that's not free, right? That's not part of the free zone. Was
No,
it ever considered to be?
I know that, oh yeah, and there's, yeah, the mayor just mentioned that we're the 4th busiest hub. There's a new program I know that Trax is looking at, so stay tuned for more to come on that.
Other questions about the new Salt Lake City Airport? Raise of hands, how many people on our board or in our panelists have flown out of the new airport? Folks done it before? A couple of us? Okay. Yeah, my kids really enjoy the Lego store, I'll have to say. Like, they actually consider it the Lego store that also is the place where planes are. So
I love that. That's been a very popular store.
Well, and we like to see the 9th and 9th businesses in nearby, like Hip and Humble and King's English Bookshop and others that are there. So that's a little bit of home as you head away from home. So.
It is. It is.
Great. All right. Well, if no more questions for Nancy, I really appreciate your time and excellent presentation. Do you mind if I share this presentation on our Facebook page and in our newsletter coming up?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you again. I really appreciate the time on your agenda.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, moving right along, we have Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall has joined us. She's came over from the Fair Park Community Council, so we really appreciate you doing a double community council night, maybe even triple. I don't even know. Maybe there's a late night community council that I'm not told about. That's where all the
Don't
cool people
encourage
go.
it, Jason.
But I don't think you need an introduction for this crowd, considering you're our former council member, you live in ELPCO, but I appreciate that Weston Clark is here as well, well known to many of us. So we'll have you take it away. We sent you some questions ahead of time. We'll probably have some questions from our audience as well. So thank you and welcome, Mayor.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And thanks, of course, to Tim Cosgrove for holding down the fort on my behalf at ELPCO meetings when I am not able to attend. So thanks, Tim. You do a great job. And good to see you, friends. A lot of people I know in the chat and on the board. So happy to be with you. And do you want me to just rattle through the questions, Jason? Okay. I wasn't looking at those, so I will pull them up and try to see you at the same time. Okay, I recommended a $4 million community grant pool for community-based organizations and businesses as part of the city's allocation of the American Rescue Plan funding that we received. What kind of groups and projects are you looking to fund, and how will these grants be different from existing grant programs? Great question. We'll have to go through the RFP process to identify which organizations we are going to work with and give funding to. But I can give you some examples from the pandemic so far that we've been working with. I think of the Tip Your Server program that we worked with local restaurateurs and bar owners to get direct cash into their employees' hands, who were really the first hit and some of the longest impacted from an employment perspective. Our open streets work that we did to open our streets to bikes and strollers and rollerblades and walkers and not to vehicles. That's the kind of initiative that we could see more of. Or our Raise Up SLC, and Weston Clark and his team did that through Comunidades Unidas and the CAP program, I think, where we gave cash cards through those communities to Salt Lake City residents specifically, and we prioritized those who for different immigration statuses may not have received federal support dollars as most households did in the state of Utah. So we've been doing those kind of community-based partnerships, and we would love to see more of those through these dollars. And so half of that will go to the economic development group for the community-based assistance. And that could also include legal services for like for eviction assistance, meaning for renters themselves. And access to healthcare would be another great opportunity. We'd love to see funding. And then there will be arts and business assistance. And I think I got that backwards. So the arts and business will go to economic development, and community and neighborhoods, or CAN, will do the community-based organization distribution. So if you're an artist who's had impacts from the pandemic, many of them have makers, even tech and entrepreneur startups that are going to be able to address some COVID-related economic impacts. We want to get some funding into your hands. So the council will be considering that. They already started the consideration of my rescue plan recommendations last Tuesday. And for the next few council meetings, you can have your voices heard on that at the public hearings that they host. Let me see what's next. Will the city's new park rangers program, also funded by $3.9 million in rescue plan dollars, be law enforcement officers or have any law enforcement training? Or are they meant to be consistent, visible presence in the parks to reduce public safety calls and the need for police responses? What training will they receive, and what will be their measures of success? Will SLC or the police department release data on incidents in the park before and then after the park ranger program? Also, how many rangers? This is like 7 questions in one, and I'm glad it's in front of me so I can try to address them.
I had to try. I mean, you know.
I can do this. Okay. Not law enforcement officers, no. So back when I was your council person, I asked the city council to fund and recreate the bike squad. You might remember that. I think that was 2015 or 16 that we did that. We brought back the bike squad. And that was from sitting in Liberty Park, literally with when Youth City used to get us together there with community stakeholders, and those conversations, just like this, informed that. So we brought bike patrol back. Now we've grown it and we have 4 patrol squads, bike patrol, but we need a full-time presence in the parks. And we also recognize that the presence of police officers doesn't communicate necessarily safety and welcoming to everyone in our community. And from the beginning of advocating for park rangers as your councilwoman, I wanted it to be in basically the public lands division, what it was then. Now it's our public lands department. And now that I'm the mayor, I get to make that decision. So I'm asking for 16 full-time positions, new full-time positions funded by the rescue plan dollars that would be situated in our public lands division. So they will not carry guns. They will not be post certified or trained. They will be first aid trained. They'd be trained on the local flora and fauna and ecosystems around there, be able to give directions, help people out, and also to enforce park rules. But if there is criminal activity, they'll have a walkie-talkie and be able to link up with our first responders. If somebody needs medical attention, they can connect with the fire department and the EMTs. So I think, did I get all of those, Jason? Measures of success. Oh, and also the data. So data is a great way to measure. And right now you could go to slcpd.com and go to the CompStat data tracking, and you can zoom in onto certain areas. You can set your time range. You can look at different types of crime or calls for service. So we definitely already have the pre-existing data. And if the council approves this on, as they consider all of the rescue plan requests that I've made, then I'm hopeful that we would be able to list these positions in January, and that we could have park rangers trained up and in our parks by springtime. And by the way, it's not all of the parks. It is Fairmont Park, Liberty Park, Jordan Park, and the entirety of the Jordan River Parkway. And there's a 4th park. Weston can throw in the chat for me. For some reason, the 4th park is escaped. Oh, Pioneer Park downtown. Never mind, Weston. Thanks. Okay. Did I get all that, Jason?
I just had a quick question. Do you think the data is going to be available like CompStat, or is it going to be something that's going to be in a different area because they're not law enforcement?
You know, I don't know if Kristen Riker were here, she could probably tell you what she's been thinking about from a data tracking perspective. And it sounds like maybe you're asking about like, how many times do they give directions or render first aid or call homeless services with the VOA street outreach team, things like that. Yeah. So interestingly, we did a city exploration through the Downtown Alliance, which they host usually once a year, but it hasn't happened in a couple of years. We went to Kansas City recently to see what that city's doing. And part of it was in relation to their downtown management. And I'll try not to make this long. The downtown ambassadors that they have in Kansas City track through their phones and an app that they have exactly those kind of interactions. So it's not 911 calls for service. It's really what kind of activities are you doing out there, whether it's administering naloxone on the streets of Kansas City or telling a tourist how to get to their hotel. And we've been I think the Downtown Alliance, and I can at least say for Salt Lake City, we're really anxious to have that kind of data feedback from our downtown ambassador program, but it seems like a fantastic tool. Thanks for bringing up the question that our park rangers could use as well. Really good question. Okay. Something's not working with the state's new approach to homelessness decisions and funding. For example, the Utah Homelessness Council's role in the ballpark shelter decision. Elected officials and stakeholders made a big decision, and yet no one seemed to own it, let alone understand it. How are you working to reform the system to work better for Salt Lake City? So let me start by acknowledging that Salt Lake City has been and wants to continue to be a good partner in addressing the statewide homelessness crisis. That is not the city's issue. It is a statewide and obviously a national issue. But that and therefore I've been grateful for Wayne Niederhauser's work in his new role as the state's homeless coordinator and the team that he now has in this new role in the governor's office. I think he's doing a fantastic job of immersing himself in the complexities and the humanity of the crisis as it is, and starting to evaluate and come to some recommendations around what could happen to have the system work better. So the Utah Homelessness Council is a result of the creation of that new role in the governor's office and this new approach. And as you know, with the very first meeting of which I'm on the council, we were asked whether or not we had a favorable or unfavorable recommendation for the state to assist by the tune of $3 million with the funds from the road home that was sold in order for the shelter, the homeless board, to acquire the VOA detox facility on Brooklyn Avenue. And it was presented as a future winter overflow option because VOA has intended to keep operating the detox component for some time, at least until possibly next winter. And that's how the board was presented with this opportunity. And as a longtime supporter as a city with homeless needs in the state, and as a mayor who over the last 2 winters has helped to make a winter overflow shelter happen in our city, I definitely appreciate pre-planning of where winter shelter can go, and that it wasn't the city doing that work. But the glaring reality that I think settled in with more than myself on that board after that vote was taken, was that really what it entitled for the property was that, even though I don't believe that was the intention of the applicant at the time, is a full-time permanent shelter in the future. And there was no land use determination that would begin a public process around that. It's the Utah Homelessness Council as this new entity doesn't even have a public hearing function, which it obviously should. And they also weren't making the decision, but they were making the decision that ended up determining whether the state would issue the money, and the money was where the decision was made. So this whole thing is absent enough public input. It also begs the question of whether or not it should be the city or any city with future considerations they make, whose duty it is to take on their public conversations. I think that it's the Utah Homelessness Council that needs to build this kind of collaboration with whatever city those decisions are being made in. And so that's what I've submitted to Wayne Niederhauser and to the executive board, that we need to talk about and remedy the lack of public coordination that this board ends up basically making a funding decision on, a recommendation that the state doesn't have to take, but they did last time. That was a long story, but I think it's important that we recognize that the system is going in a improved direction with greater participation by the state, and people like Wayne Niederhauser saying to the governor, we want $200 million from the state in your budget for affordable housing. Like, we've never seen that kind of a request before. We'll see what happens. But anyway, that the lack of public process is a glaring omission so far from that council.
Thank you, Mayor. So it sounds like this was sort of the first exercise for the Utah Homelessness Council to sort of work with the city, and that public engagement part was not there. You're asking for the council to take that on, learn how to do it, work with the city. So when instead of 3 million, it's 200 million, they have a little better process.
Yeah, the 200 million actually isn't going through or
Not to them. Okay.
No,
But whatever future project happens.
Yes, yeah, and that's Wayne Niederhauser asking the governor, as he's putting together his budget, to set aside 200 million 100 of which would be for 60% AMI and below, the other 100 million for 40% AMI and below, including permanent supportive housing. So it's a tremendous ask, but it's not going through that council. But yes, that was the very first meeting of that council. And unfortunately, it had a very important decision embedded in it. And I'm grateful that it's transitioned now. And a lot of things have happened as a result of that decision, like a moratorium on shelter applications for the next 5 months or so. But not temporary. I need to be clear about that. Not temporary shelter restriction. People and entities can still apply for that.
Is it right that they're still looking for about 200 beds for the current winter overflow shelter in Salt Lake County in this area?
Yeah, and then and part of the rescue plan request that I've made to the council is $1 million on the table to assist in the operations, not the acquisition of a place, but the operations of a winter overflow shelter anywhere in Salt Lake County. So when I said that we want to keep being a good partner, we sincerely do. And I think that's obvious by us offering as the only entity in the state so far to offer to fund winter shelter operations. But this needs to be balanced out. Salt Lake City is 17% of the county population and declining. We were 18% last year. We're 17%. We're 72% of homeless services in the county. We're 74% of all the permanent supportive beds in the county. And we get $0 guaranteed from the state, where South Salt Lake and Midvale are guaranteed millions of dollars together to pay for police officers to keep the areas around their homeless resource centers safe and approachable. We get $0 guaranteed. We have to compete with every other city in the state. So there's a lot to remedy here, but I have a lot of gratitude for Andrew Johnston, who is brilliant in this work and honest and very straightforward, and that Wayne Niederhauser is appreciating working with us now. Okay, should I go to the next one? Salt Lake City has a testy relationship with the Utah legislature. How can you and other Salt Lake City-based state lawmakers intervene to make the relationship work better? Actually, I'd say that we have a very good working relationship with our legislature at this time. It's a relationship that's built on communication and honesty, and that there have been a lot of decisions that I've made, some of them related to the pandemic, that have been based in public health and have been different from what I think state legislators would have made in their cities or areas they represent. And yet we're still here and we're still able to have our kids go to school with masks on. And I don't do it to try to provoke the legislature. And I do try to reach out before I make those kind of announcements and give the leadership a heads up and hear their opinions about it, and respect that they have that opinion, and I may be making a different opinion, but we communicate about it. So I think we're in a very functional, I'm trying to knock on wood, more functional than we have been in a long time. How has my decision making about the city's response to COVID-19 changed in recent months with the recent wave of infections driven by the Delta variant? And what data trends do I look at? How granular zip code census tract? Or what do you seek? Who do you seek it? Who or what do you seek advice from? So the decision to put a mask order in place over Salt Lake City School District is something in the recent months with the wave of infections, obviously, and that was made by working directly with Salt Lake County Health Department and Dr. Dunn, who helps us as a city, and obviously every city in this county. This is one of the weirdest things that, especially as the capital city, we have some of the greatest people really in the country doing the public service that they're doing. We've got people with all sorts of professional backgrounds and talents. We don't have a public health person. That is not something that really any city in the state does, because we rely on our county or other health departments for that. So navigating the pandemic has meant a very close alignment with the state health department, the county health department, and then working quite directly with our hospital leadership at the University of Utah and at Intermountain. So that's who I turn to. And fortunately, they are almost always on the same page about what can be done and what maybe should be done based on ICU utilization by COVID cases, the rate of spread, community spread, the percentage of vaccination in our council districts. And you can tune in to any city council meeting that has a work session. Well, they all have work sessions. They don't all have formal meetings. And at the very top of the 2 o'clock meeting, unless they have an RDA, it's at 3 o'clock. I give a presentation with an update on our city specific data, some school district data, and the city specific data is broken up by zip code. And that's thanks to the health department. So if you're interested in that, I'm sure Tim can pull those slides from our most recent presentation and share them with the community council. Keep on. Why is the city and the county perpetually short of beds and resources for the region's homeless community? Is the number of unsheltered people growing bigger overall, a net increase over time, or are the current solutions not reducing the number of people who need shelter and resources? Great questions. COVID this year compromised the annual point in time count because it's usually happens at the beginning of January. And if you'll recall, that's when we were really peaking with our COVID spread in Salt Lake County. So there was a point in time count I think to some extent, but not normally, not sufficient. And so that gives us our best snapshot typically. They did a makeup one just recently, and I have not yet seen the numbers from that. But therefore, from a data perspective, it's difficult for us to say that there was an increase, even though anecdotally and from the experience of the shelter providers, there has been an increase, of course, because people's housing has been compromised and it's a pandemic. So the collective group who is assigned to manage what the need is and what the strategy is to respond to that need is called the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. And that is just Salt Lake County, obviously. They are legislatively basically obliged to come up with what the winter shelter strategy is and manage the conversation about whether or not there's enough permanent supportive beds, which were 450 short according to them, and 300 beds short on the emergency shelter. The trouble is, even though they're obliged to do that, this is through HUD, there's direction of who should make these decisions. They have no paid staff. So the whole coalition is made up of all of the entities basically volunteering staff to participate in it. And they have zero land use authority. So they can come up with, like they do most years, and say, we need this many 100 shelter beds. Draper, would you be willing? Door shuts. West Valley, would you be willing? Door shuts. They have no ability that's proven out yet to be in a decision-making position about how to implement the plans they're required to make. So Salt Lake City has stepped up in dire circumstances from a failure to meet the needs across this county. And to what I was saying before, I support the coalition's call for more beds. I support, and we support financially, both of these things, the emergency shelter operation needs and permanent supportive bed needs, but it needs to be better balanced throughout Salt Lake County. It needs to be better balanced, and we need to be receiving guaranteed mitigation dollars for Salt Lake City for what we already host. So why are we perpetually short? There's a lot of reasons there, and that's a good question for the coalition whose job that is. but I'll also say that I think we are, as a state, unsatisfactorily addressing the fact that we are the fastest growing population in this country, in the state of Utah. And we need to be measuring, and I brought this actually to the Utah Homeless Council last week, we need to be measuring how our homeless population growth may be proportionate to our general population growth. It seems like it is. And if it is, then we need to be planning for that proportionate growth in services and permanent supportive housing and transitional housing. And we're not doing that yet. We're in a responsive mode right now, not a planning mode, as much as I think we should be. Okay. What are some of the findings and recommendations coming out of the Salt Lake City Racial Equity and Policing Commission? Excuse me. Yes, there were several, and my 2021 budget included those recommendations. So one of them was to hire an additional 12 social workers for our co-responder model. And the city council did that. And that puts us almost at 24-hour coverage for mental health professional on duty to respond when that kind of assistance may be better than a police officer responding alone. And the reason, frankly, that I think that the council didn't commit all the way up to filling the 24-hour cycle is that we knew that we wouldn't have enough officers to co-deploy with that many social workers in just 1 year. So we will get there. And I think the community heard the council's commitment to that. They also asked for, and we did fund $200,000 for additional community-based education around inclusion and equity and diversity training. So part of that will be going out to RFP for community members particularly from our diverse communities to come and teach our police officers about what the history of relationship is with that particular community in the police department, what kind of maybe cultural ways of engagement or response the officers should know about the community members and so on. So that was funded. A new senior level staff position was recommended and funded for my office to engage with, or to really be a liaison between our education partners, the school district and beyond, and the SRO, the school resource officers. And then they recommended to continue setting aside funds around, or to preserve the funding around community-based policing, and the council did approve that. The Commission on Racial Equity and Policing has public meetings. They're on Zoom. You can tune in and check out what they're talking about and exploring and recommending. And it's the only commission of its kind in our state. And we've made changes, including other reform changes that weren't budgetarily related, that no other department in the state has matched. So they're doing great work.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up, Mayor, about that?
Yeah,
it's tangential, but it deals with the shortage in law enforcement officers
Yeah.
currently within Salt Lake City's police ranks. I know you've talked about sort of some new classes coming on, the training, the timeline. Can you give us an update on that and what your administration is doing together with Chief Brown to bring on more officers, to reduce the response times that have been growing in the past couple of months?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And I'll invite you that if you want to tune into that beginning of the city council meeting, right after my update, Andrew Johnston gives an update on homelessness needs and services for the week and status of the homeless resource centers. And it's brief and fascinating. And then Chief Brown gives an update on what call time is looking like, our hiring status, and all of that happens in about a 20-minute segment. So that's something we're updating publicly, and every single time the council meets. We hit a low of 91 vacancies by the end of June of this year. We put in place a pay increase that has been almost 40 years in the making, where not since the Corradini administration had our police department led the state in pay. And that is decisions every year over the course of many administrations. So our city council and I negotiated to a place where we raised the pay of our police 30% for starting officers, 12% for top out, and there's a range in between there. Fire department came up about 4%, and 911 and all of our other AFSCME employees also came up to lead the state plus 1%. In addition to that, some of the funding recommendations through the budget included a full-time mental health professional in the public safety building to be accessible to our officers. And that person's hired and building a team out now, and really trying to just improve the morale by giving that kind of support to our officers that they need. So we are now at a vacancy of 55. I believe that we are hiring officers faster than any other department in the state. And we have a shortage of 600 to 700 police officers in the state of Utah. Last I heard, Highway Patrol is down 70 officers. So it is not unique to Salt Lake City, and there's a lot of competition for that talent right now. We're going to keep bringing on new classes of recruits. We hope to have another class start in January, and it takes a few months, and then we'll start another class in the spring after that. And also hope to be announcing some new ways to increase our laterals, which are officers moving from other departments choosing to come work here in Salt Lake City. So it's going in the right direction. In addition, our call time response for priority 1 calls, which had hit a really deplorable over 17-minute average. Those numbers were from August. When we got the September numbers back at the beginning of this month, we saw that number come down over 3 minutes. So it's down into the 14-minute range. Ideally, we would be at 6 minutes, but over the course of history, that resides around a 10-minute average typically. So we're going in the right direction, and we're not satisfied yet. So there's a lot of tenacity around rebuilding our department and supporting the folks that we have. Team Whale, Team Gnome, Team Noel. I don't know how to say that, Jason.
I don't think it's an actual creature, but who knows?
How about coexist, lichen and moss? It's gonna be okay, folks. Obviously, I'm Team Whale. I approved the Art Advisory Board's recommendation of the whale, and I think that the metaphors that the artist saw in this potential and presented to the Arts Board around the ecosystem that a whale attracts around it, and the uniqueness and unexpectedness of it is relational to the 9th and 9th neighborhood. And it's what drew me down here when I was barely 18 years old to live in a basement not far from where Jason Stevenson lives now, and never really wanting to leave because this place keeps surprising and delighting and keeping me on my toes. So I'm Team Whale. I hope you all can think of them as lichen and moss. The gnomes don't have to leave.
Great. Well, thank you. Mayor, you marched through those questions like Patton breaking out of Normandy. So thank you for doing that, work in a World War II illusion, really. But I wanted to kind of reach out to our board members and to the chat to see if there's some other questions that we might want to address. Let's see here.
Do you want to field the chat, Jason?
Sure. And I want to also mention, I appreciate Weston Clark putting in the links to the most recent city council updates that you mentioned that kind of at the beginning, at the top of each meeting. It's not that boring. It's actually really exciting stuff. I'll have to admit, like you learn a lot just in 20 minutes. And then they get into the detail talking about like fire hydrants and land zoning and all that. But that top of the meeting is quite informative. So I encourage folks to check out those links. The one question that came was, how many social workers have we hired? How big is our social worker force right now within the police department? I know that might be a question that Chief Brown or others might be better suited to answer, but is this, you said almost 24/7 coverage, right? Like we're approaching that kind of that measure. Is that unusual in Utah or across the nation?
Yeah, I don't know that there are other police departments with social workers in the state. If anyone does know, please let me know, but I have not heard of any. And this was an idea that came from Stan Penfold when we were on the city council. And I think he got it from a city exploration trip, that like the Kansas City one that I talked about, but I don't quite remember. And we funded those maybe in 2016. I think we've had 8 as a high number. And just with vacancies, actually social workers are really in high demand, and it's hard to hire social workers right now because of that. So I think with the supervisor who is a social worker and is doing the work, not just supervising, there's 8. So adding 12 takes us up to 20. And just in case you're wondering why they co-respond, I asked that question. Do you want to go out? Are there circumstances where you think it would be more beneficial to go out without a police officer? None of them want to do that. None of them feel secure doing that, and they like the way it's working. So that means 20 police officers really working with these 20 social workers. And I'm sorry, I don't know where we're at in the process with the hiring of the 12 that were funded. I know that those jobs are posted, and we could probably get you an update in your next meeting through Tim.
Other questions from our board? Nothing from the chat. I had one quick question. The American Rescue Funding, how big a pile of money is that? Like when it comes to Salt Lake City, like is this, how is it compared to our normal budget for the city? Like, what does it mean? Is it like Christmas, or is it like Arbor Day in terms of the impact?
Well, if you can't think of it like Christmas, because unless you think about it like you got robbed right before Christmas and your stuff was gone, a lot of your stuff was gone. So the city, as you know, has lost a lot of revenue through the pandemic. Our downtown occupancy is still under 50%. It got down into the 20% for almost a year. And all those people who come into our city to go to work and go to school, and more than double our population during the day, they weren't here. They weren't spending money. So one of the primary functions of the rescue plan dollars from the federal government is for cities and counties and states to be able to replace lost revenue so that we can keep our employees and pay them a fair wage and not cut services. And that was my commitment to you at the top of the pandemic, was that I was going to put together a budget that allowed us to keep those things going. And we did, but it meant that we were in the hole a little ways. Actually, we managed it very well. And we're set to recover very well, but these dollars, 55 million of our 87 million that's being allocated is going to the Salt Lake City employees that you work with for fair pay and really for our lost revenue that we've been covering in other ways. So it's not a lot compared to our more than $300 million budget that we deal with. And that's excluding all of our enterprise funds like public utilities and the airport. And it's really not a lot when you think about the couple $100 million that the county has. The number is not on the top of my head, and the 1.3 billion in rescue plan dollars that the state has. So we have a city-sized portion of that, but it is wonderful. And I didn't want us to spend these dollars on 100 different projects that we weren't necessarily going to see or have a long-standing impact from. So my proposal really concentrates the impact of these to just a few things. And Weston, I would love it if you could put something in the chat with a link to what the rescue plan proposal is, because I'm probably going on too long, but I'd love to tell you all about it.
Gotcha. That's great to know. 87 million versus 300 million. That gives us a good kind of slice of the pie. And 55 million going to support employees and staffing, kind of keeping that.
Lost revenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lost revenue.
Yeah.
I had one kind of quick follow-up question too. You just came from the Fair Park Community Council. What were their questions like? Are they different from the questions we're asking? I'm curious. It's all the way on the other side of the city, and yet, do we share the same issues?
I think that you do share same issues, but in this consolidated session of time that we have to speak together, we talked about public safety on North Temple, and the frustration during the summer of 2020 when there were protests basically every day and sometimes several a day that our officers were deployed to. And at the same time, there were all of the pressures on our city of crime and also of encampments and people needing mental health and behavioral health assistance. So we talked about how that's evolved and the bike squads being deployed there and the expansion of the Downtown Ambassador program into the North Temple corridor. We talked about the balance of affordable housing. And I believe that we should stop concentrating affordable housing basically on the west side of our city. And you know this, I've talked to you about this for many years and created funding like our $8 million last month that we announced for affordable housing. 2.5 of that is set aside for areas of high opportunity, like this neighborhood, where a developer could get some of that money to build affordable housing in neighborhoods of high opportunity. But that in order for the economy of North Temple corridor, for example, but really lots of parts of districts 1 and 2 to be a thriving economy where there's a coffee shop where you can go get a breakfast burrito somewhere, instead of just, I think, the 2 places I'm aware of that you could get one right now in districts 1 and 2 combined. Like, people need to have money in their pocket that they can spend on these things to support those kind of economies. So we don't lose great businesses that are trying to make a go of it there. And that means we need market rate mixed with affordable housing. And that mix of income is going to allow that neighborhood to finally get on some stable economic footing and affect the quality of life there. So that's a lot of what we talked about.
Great. Well, thank you, Mayor. If there's no further questions, I want to thank you for your time, for joining us, and checking in. We really appreciate it. We familiar presence at ELPCO meetings going back many years. So it's good to see you, and thank you for taking the time.
It's great to be with you, and I hope we get to go back to the aviary and see each other again soon. Thank you.
Someday soon, we hope. Of course, we'll look to your data to tell us when and what we can do on that too.
Please get vaccinated.
Well, thank you.
Please get vaccinated. Get your booster.
Great. Well, thank you, Weston, as well, for being here and helping out. Those links are very helpful. We'll put that into the edited video we put together as well. But now in ELPCO, we get to move on to our favorite topic, which is streets and parking, right? Like, who doesn't love a good meeting about streets and parking? I wanted to give a little bit of update about 3 major streets projects we have coming up in the next couple of years affecting ELPCO. What's interesting is that they can kind of get a little confusing. So I tried to create a bit of a shorthand to help people tell them apart. Let me actually put the links into the chat for everyone to see as I kind of walk through it. So first up, we have the 800 East Neighborhood Byway. This is kind of continuing out of the Stay Safe, Stay Active streets campaign the mayor mentioned that happened during the spring and summer of 2020. I call this the Sunday Ride Project to kind of make it different from some of the other projects out there. It's going to be a safe space for bikes, pedestrians, and other outside activities. It's going to be on 800 East. And it's going to go, it's going to be 800 East, and it's go from 800 South all the way down to 1700 South. That's going to be the major impact, which is really ELPCO, right there. It will continue a little further south eventually, but that's the main part. It's going to include bulb outs, which are sort of ways to kind of slow down traffic and make crossing streets easier, traffic circles, enhanced crosswalks, things that really just bring people into the streets a little bit safer, whether they're walking or using a bicycle or, playing kickball on the street, which is what I used to do growing up. That kind of is what we're aiming for. It is actually, they have a preferred design concept in the link that you can check out. That's based on a survey they did where they had 460 responses. And it's going to be implemented basically 2021, 2022. Is we're going to see it. It's not a major reconstruction. It's kind of little pockets of reforms that are going to be happening up and down 800 East. And really make it a place that you can take that Sunday afternoon bike ride on, which is what my kids and I like to do. What we did back when they had it closed down in 2020 a little bit. So that is the 800 East Neighborhood Byway. We've had presentations about it. Expect to see that project coming online first among the ones that we're talking about. The second one is the 900 South Reconstruction Phase 2, which we've talked about a lot. because phase one was going from 13th East to Lincoln. That really went to the roundabout project in 9th and 9th. That was that project of 900 South reconstruction. Phase two actually would extend that from Lincoln Street really all the way to 300 West and even beyond, eventually going out to 900 West. So it's this kind of it's kind of the belt of the city on 900 South, to cross from, thinking about going from Hogle Zoo all the way out to the Jordan River. This is really what that project's about. It's going to be improved crosswalks, bike lanes, some changes to the streets and gutters, some water main improvements here and there. Very similar to what we've already seen with phase one in ELPCO. We were really the first group to experience this. It also will include the full reconstruction of the 9th and 9th intersection. Really a favorite and popular part of our neighborhood. They're going to really try to retain a lot of the distinctive artwork and other things that make that intersection so cool, down to the colored pavement. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but if you look at the pavement in the 9th and 9th intersection, it's actually painted concrete. It's something that they did back maybe 15 years ago when they first did that, and they're going to retain that element there. Right now, the construction's happening in Central 9th. You go down to Spy Hop or Water Witch, you see how the streets are really torn up down there. That is, that's what this phase is happening right now. We're going to see it in 9th and 9th in the summer of 2022 and into the 2023. So that's where we're going to see this. And I call this the Go West project. Sunday Drive project is in the 800 East. The 900 South is the Go West, because this will allow ELPCO residents to jump on their bikes and head out west, head downtown, head to Liberty Park, head to the Jordan River Trail. The way that we really connect to the rest of the city on 900 South, which is, I think, going to be a great asset for our community. And the last project is the one that we're going to see a little bit later on. We're not going to see this one until 2023 and 2024. This is the 1100 East reconstruction. I'm calling that the gateway to the Sugar House project, or the gateway to 9th and 9th if you live in Sugar House. It's going to be this north-south connector to connect the 9th and 9th and the Sugar House areas. Right now, the project is engaged down in Highland Avenue and around Route 80. They've done some work there, some permanent, some a little bit more temporary. I was fortunate enough to take a bike ride with Tim Cosgrove. Watch out, he's a speed demon on a bike. Never try to race against him. And someone from Salt Lake City Transportation. We went up and down 11th East, really learning about what this project's going to be. It's devoted into different segments. And the segment that we're probably most interested in is from 17th South to 9th South. That's the heart of ELPCO. And of course, runs through some businesses. There's a lot of residential there, Emerson Elementary, McClellan Trail, Inglewood Park, a lot of connectors, a lot of interesting things there. It's actually a little bit of an open book. Unlike some of the other projects, they haven't really picked the design for the 11th East reconstruction in ELPCO. And that's a project that we're going to be able to actually have some impact on, which is pretty exciting. That one won't happen until 2023 and 2024, but we'll be able to figure out whether or not we want bike lanes or protected bike lanes. Do we want parking on both sides of the street or one side of the street? Where do we need new crosswalks? Where are safer crosswalks going to be for kids going to Emerson or going to Inglewood Park or connecting to the McClellan Trail? So this is going to be a project we'll be very much engaged in further out, but I think a project that, especially if you've ever biked or driven on 11th East, it's a little bumpy, and that street could use some help. And so it's going to be exciting to see it repaved and redesigned to be a little bit easier for transit up and down between Sugar House and 9th and 9th. So that last one, the 11th East project, is the gateway to Sugar House for ELPCO. I'm sure in Sugar House, Judy, they call it the gateway to the 9th and 9th project, right? That's probably what they call it, at least I hope. All those are in the links in the chat. You can sign up for updates, get email updates, and ELPCO will be very engaged, especially in the 11th East project, which is one where we're going to be able to shape it and tell Salt Lake City Transportation what we want and work with them to develop a really nice north-south connector. Are there any questions about that rundown of some of the streets projects that we've got coming up? None so far. It's going to be some inconvenience, obviously, but I mean, if you've driven on 13th East, you know how really smooth and nice that street is after they redesigned it. I wouldn't ride a bike on 13th East exactly, but we will be able to ride bikes on 800 East and 11th East because those are what those are going to be designed for. Great. Any questions on those? No? Okay, well, pay attention and definitely get involved. We'll be working with our 11th East business community on that quite a bit. One other announcement I wanted to make was about the whale sculpture, the 900 South roundabout. That sculpture and the mural that will accompany it has been delayed until the spring, until April 2022. You've probably heard a lot about supply chain issues that are affecting everything from books to TVs and everything. Well, apparently it affects fiberglass whales as well. So that is somewhere stuck on a ship somewhere in Long Beach Harbor. I'm just kidding, but there's elements to that which have delayed it, as well as the weather needing some really the right temperatures and rain-free days, which we really haven't had a lot of, to be able to apply that mural. So the safe bet was to wait until April 2022 to do the installation and add the mural. The mural is going to be painted by a Mike Murdoch, who is not exactly an ELPCO resident, but he has family that live here. And he worked for many years at Cafe Espresso, which is the coffee place just right tucked into the side of that roundabout. So an artist who brings some very local perspective to that. Check out our recent newsletter for a picture of what that mural will be like. We'll look forward to that in the spring, something to look forward to after hopefully a good winter season. We'll have a new sculpture and mural to arrive in the springtime. All right. Oh, he's also a brand artist. Yeah, he's done some really cool murals. You know, the mural across from Lassie's, the Mediterranean restaurant over in Central 9th. He did the mural on the roofing building right across the street from that. I forget what that is, Jefferson or something like that. So that's some of his artwork there as well. Gotcha. Did you send out the posters throughout the community for the 800 East project? That's from Ron. I don't know if we sent out any posters yet, but we did do some of the publicity for them. There was going to be an event on the 800 East project last weekend at Herman Frank's Dog Park. It was rained out. I think they're going to do a pop-up event to kind of show what that is in early November, whatever that first Saturday in November is. I think is it November 6th? I think that's when they're going to try to redo that. So there will be a public event in the morning on, I think it was November 6th, for the 800 East Neighborhood Byway project. One thing that we do recommend when any Salt Lake City transportation project happens is they actually put physical signs in the ground with QR codes, so that when people are walking around, they actually get to interact with those signs and get to know a little bit more about these projects that are coming. Because we know that postcards and emails and all that sometimes don't work, but a QR code on a sign and stuck in the ground can impact a lot of folks, and people can see it. Any new business or any questions that we want to bring up? Let me just scan the chat to see if I missed anything. Doesn't look like that. I encourage everyone to sign up for those street updates, those emails. They don't spam you. They just let you know when things are happening in your neighborhood. And it's a good way to know what is coming down the road, so to speak. All right. Well, we do have some nominations and voting we're going to get to. Unfortunately, Christina Robb wasn't able to make it. She is our West of East representative, so we'll postpone that until the next meeting. And I did want to mention that ELPCO normally doesn't meet in November or December, so this will be our last meeting of 2021. So we get to actually say see you next year a little bit early compared to all those silly conversations in December. But we'll be in touch on our newsletter and on social media. And as always, you can reach out to us at elpcoslc@gmail.com. We try to do our best to respond to any questions you've got. Any other business from our board? Mayor, anybody? No, we're good. All right. I think my kids are still needing a bath. I'm trying to stretch this meeting out as long as I can so I don't have to participate in that, because it is mayhem. But I think I got to bite it and go and do it.
Just because you invite, can I just, anybody who is feeling those compassionate stirrings in your heart about the refugees and some other refugees who are coming into the city, there is help needed through the IRC, and please reach out. I think Tim can also probably liaison if you want to email Tim. I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot. They need volunteers to even help set up the apartments, like just to put the stuff into the house and stock the houses. So if you want to volunteer over this winter, it's a great way to connect, and the IRC would love your help.
Thank you, May. And that's IRC is International Rescue Committee, right? The group that works with refugee resettlement. That's great news. And I also, you reminded me that there are some vacancies on the Salt Lake City Racial Equity and, Commission on Racial Equity and Policing. There's a couple of vacancies on that board. So if folks want to give back to their city, volunteering and participating in boards is a great way to do that. I think you just have to be 16 years old and committed to the city. So even high school students can be involved. There have been some recently. So think about that as another way to give back to your community. So great. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. Appreciate it. Hope everyone's got their Halloween costume set. And we'll see you over on Windsor Street on Sunday night. That's the place to be. So.